All right, guys, we're going to be doing something a little different today. Rather than more maintenance, we're going to be building a 2-inch, basically a civilian receiver for the 7-ton. So pretty basic stuff. This is one of the parts you'll have to buy. This is just like a Reese 2-inch receiver. I've got some gussets that I cut out. You'll see where these go in a sec, but basically this was a cutoff of the receiver. Some gussets you'll see a little bit later. These will be the chain hooks for the receiver. This is a piece of 4-inch, 1/4-inch wall steel tubing that we had to cut out right here for the receiver. And then these are basically the drop-down plates that'll hold the receiver in. I've got a friend that has a plasma cutter, CNC plasma cutter, so he cut this part out. This is 5.5 inches thick, and this will change depending on how far down you want your hitch. And then I drilled these holes in. The cool part about this, you don't have to do any modifications. You've got to grind a little weld down here, but if you painted over that, you'd never know it. So this can be returned back to stock at any time. The only other thing you have to really buy is some new hardware and just the bolts, because the nuts work. These are just 7/8 flanged head bolts, and you can reuse the nuts. So you'll see a little bit, you can almost get away with using the existing bolts, but you can't. So I'm going to try to make this as short a video as I can. But what I'll do is I'm going to show you one other thing over on the mill, and then we'll get this mocked up and tacked into place and then welded in. All right, so we're over at the mill, and show you how I drilled these holes. I used a 7/8 annular cutter. You could hand drill these with a drill bit, but annular cutters make a beautiful finish, and they drill very accurately. So, you know, and I lied back there. Those bolts are not 7/8; they're 3/4-inch bolts. I drilled at 7/8, which is an 1/8 bigger, so you get a 1/16 per side for a little bit of adjustment. Once you weld this with the heat and everything's going to move around a little bit. So I figured drilling them an 1/8 over was probably pretty smart. Same thing here. Beautiful finish, and pretty easy to do on the mill. One thing I did, the bolt spacing on the truck is kind of funky. And you only get one shot to drill these. If you drill them wrong, you're going to be in there with a die grinder or something for hours and hours. So I cut a test piece, and I tried to figure out spacing. I did figure out spacing is 3 inches this way, and this dimension I got about 2-inch 280 thou. And so these were all test, I drilled these to like 2 5/16, was too small. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Yeah, so I nailed it right there, and that's absolutely perfect. And I laid this out with Dicom and center punched it because the annular cutter has a center in it, but you can also use the dials on the table to make sure you get this pretty accurate. So anyway, these are absolutely perfect. I got that drilled in one shot, so I was pretty happy about that. The other thing I did on the mill was I laid out the receiver, laid it up here, got it square, marked it, and then I took a drill bit and I drilled all the way through. So you need like a 6-inch long drill bit. I drilled through this side, down through this side, came in with an end mill, knocked that out. Now the cool part was, because I drilled all the way through, when you flip this around, you have now 4 holes that are basically parallel with the existing holes on the other side. Hit that with an end mill, and it came out pretty good. I left myself a little wiggle room, right, for weld to fit in there. But yeah, so if you're going to do this and you don't have a mill, you want to make sure that both sides are equal, right, the front and the back, because the last thing you want is this hitch, sitting all off level. Anyway, we'll go back to the truck and get this all mocked up and tacked in. Okay, so we got this all mocked up so we can tack weld it all. I'll take the camera down and kind of give you a tour handheld, see what it looks like. All right, so here's what it'll look like close up. It sucks because I had to buy new bolts. This is 1/2-inch plate. These are the existing bolts. You can see it's so close to be able to reuse the factory bolts, but if this was 3/8 it might work, but new bolts were like 30 bucks, so no big deal. And I think I'm gonna run them bolt in rather than bolt coming out, so it's less to grab on. But so here's that. It goes all the way through. I might cap this, I'm not sure yet. I don't know if mud will pack in there and create a problem. Got a gusset right here. This is just some welding wire to keep it up off the ground and try to split the difference here a little bit. So you can use those as kind of shims. This is where you've got to grind the weld down for this to fit flat. This weld, yeah, you can see it's all built up. And so this is just a gusset that'll go in like that. That'll actually add quite a bit of strength. I left a little gap under here. If it was any closer, I worry about moisture sitting in there and rusting everything out. Same thing on the other side. And then this is what this will look like. So originally this plate wasn't here and it just had 2 of these bolts. And these I get to reuse. They were long enough. So that'll get welded up. This will get welded up. And then these I'm gonna do, let's see, wrong side. I'm gonna weld these in at an angle. That'll give a little more strength than welding it like this. Plus that looks kind of crappy. I think that'll look nice. That'll strengthen that up. Still give plenty of room for the pin. One concern I had was ground clearance. So you can see the hitch doesn't stick out further than the pintle. There's this, I don't know what this bar is called, but it's kind of like a lower bumper that big rigs all have. So you will, I can't zoom out any further, you will lose a little bit of ground clearance this way, but not enough to worry about. One of the reasons I went with this, I think this is a Reese, they give you a forged piece that goes around that's welded on, so that'll strengthen that a little bit. The only other thing I'm going to do, my existing light that was in here was all burnt out, so I just put in an LED. That was temporary. I'm going to move them down here, and I'm going to add a second one. So that'll sit in there somewhere like that with another one over on this side. I'm going to take that one and just move it down low. So I actually found these old laser cut brackets I had, and I'm going to weld. See, I've got a center line there. I'm going to weld that in. So that'll sit up. You'll be able to access the nut and still get plenty of adjustment back and forth. So, but yeah, so I couldn't be happier here. So this is a angle finder. So where's the glare here? 89.9. You can't get much closer to 90. And then as you go around, we're 0.2 of a degree off, which I'm happy with. Same here. Now this is 0.7 of a degree, but this driveway or the concrete here has a little bit of slope. So remember, 0.7 of a degree, and we're 0.8 of a degree off of the, no, 6, 5, why is it moving? Anyway, so we're 0.2 of a degree off from the frame to here, and we're measuring off the frame, not off, this measures basically off earth, right? So yeah, couldn't be happier there. Same thing here, kind of anywhere you go around. I mean, geez, you can't get better than 0, right? So we're well ready to tack this all up. One concern I have, if you look at the door, you know, all these cars with computers in them, they say not to weld. So even this says, before welding, disconnect the battery cables, flasher module, vehicle VIM, ECU, MIC, all this stuff. Well, I'm not going to unplug all that stuff. What I'm going to do is just keep my ground clamp super close, so you know electricity will travel from path of least resistance. So if I'm welding here, I'm just going to keep my ground clamp here, and remember, I'm just tacking, and then I'll take this over to the bench and fully weld it. But what you wouldn't want to do is put the ground clamp on the front bumper and then weld here, because then the electricity is going to pass right through the frame. So you know, I'll clamp it here, I'll weld here, and we should be fine. So I'm not going to show the welding. It's too hard to see as I bounce around welding it up. But once it's tacked, we'll put it on the bench and see what it looks like. All right, so we've got the hitch on the welding table. I'm going to start welding it out. I'll probably do a time lapse on this so you're not watching the whole thing. All right, so here's the, I guess not the finished product because I still have to paint it, but it's all welded out. Not going to win any awards for the welds, but I don't know. They're not terrible for what we're doing. So, yeah, so here's the tabs welded on for the light brackets. I think it all came out pretty decent. Look at the quality of these holes that the annular cutter does. So, one thing I knew was going to happen, I almost welded on just a scrap piece in between to keep these from folding in. Anytime you weld on this side, it's going to pull in, and they both did. So let's see how much. It was from outside, the plate to outside was 34 9/16. So now we are 34 and, well, call it 7/16. So it moved in an eighth. And an eighth of an inch is too much. It will not fit on the truck now because these have collapsed in. So what I'll do is I'll take my high lift jack and I'll just spread this out. I'll have to spread it out probably a half of an inch because it'll spring back. And so there's a little experimenting there, but yeah, all in all, not too bad. I was running the hell out of the machine. It doesn't have that high of a duty cycle, but we're all in there. So anyway, the next step, I'm going to clean all this up. I'll wire wheel it. There's some spatter, and then we will paint it. I don't know what color I'm going to paint it yet, and I don't know if I'm going to weld on end caps yet. I've not decided. I might paint it black. I've got some 383 Cark green, so maybe we'll do that too. So I'll paint it and bring you back. Okay, we're back. It's about a week later, and I kind of lost track on where I ended this, but the last video. But anyway, we're all done. Hitch is installed, painted. I hit it with 2 coats of self-etching primer. And then this, you won't be able to see on camera, but this is like a rubberized truck bed liner coating almost. It's not super rubbery, but it's thick and pretty stout. So there it is, all installed, bolted up, done. I decided not to cap these off. I always can later, or they sell a commercially available plastic cap that just pushes in. So last video, this light was in the stock location up in here, and I'm not a huge fan of putting LEDs all over the truck, but they do work really well, so pretty happy with it. One thing I would do different, I like the function of these hooks, but once you slide a pin in here, it's kind of hard to grab once a pin's in there, it's hard to put a hook on. So I think I would do those a little bit different, but you also have the option of, and it's actually a better idea if you were able to chain to here, your safety chains, because if something terrible happened and the whole hitch ripped off, well, your receiver or the hitch that's in your receiver and this mount's all going to rip off. So it's probably safer to go on there. But we're all gusseted it up. These are what's going to add a tremendous amount of strength. And again, this was no modifications to the truck. I had to grind a little bit of weld down, and that's it. And then, like I said, you just have to buy these bolts. So these, if you remember, these 6 bolts all were coming out this way. So I just put the bolts going in. I think that's a better setup. And you do lose a tiny, tiny bit of ground clearance, but you also have this whole bar is in the way anyway. So you lose just a tiny bit. This thing's pretty stout, so even if we were to come off a rock and hit something, I don't think it's going anywhere. So that's it. I tried to make this video as short as I can. Yeah, so actually, if you look at it this way, you don't lose any ground clearance going straight over something. If you were to come down over a cliff or something, you might scratch it, but there it is. Anyway, that wraps this one up. Thanks.